All right, I think, all right, we're on, we're recording. So welcome everyone. Thank you for being here this afternoon or morning for Hawaii, I guess. Um, so I thought we could just start today with some introductions, maybe how you came to the school, maybe a little bit about what you're doing now. And okay, go. Why don't we start with Gina? You're just below me on my screen.
Oh, okay. Well, hello, I'm Gina Hindman Hahn. I was involved in the beginning of Desert Marigold School gosh, 30 years ago or so. I was a graduate of the Steiner College and was looking for a Waldorf school in Arizona. And at the time, there was only a small group called the Isolated Anthroposophists in Tucson. And then I connected with Peter and Nancy. And in the beginning years when I was on a hike I could go into a whole story about that, but I was one of the founding teachers of the Desert Marigold and was on the board for probably a dozen years or so. And I'm currently living in Eugene, Oregon. I'm still teaching preschool and enjoying planting seeds and singing songs with children. And my husband was the architect that designed the Straw Bale building, and we were a part of the hands-on. I plastered that building and did a number of hands-on projects there. So.
And Tom was also the very first president of the board.
Yes, he was the first president of the board, and we began. It was our baby we had a whole village of birthing that child. So.
All right, thank you, Gina. Kim, do you want to go?
Sure. Yeah, so I got involved with Desert Marigold about 30 years ago as well. I had just had my fourth child, Clay. He was a newborn baby, and Lily, my oldest, was entering first grade in the public school that fall. And I was reading the newspaper one morning and I saw that there was a lecture being given by Bruce Laurelin at a local church. I believe it was in Mesa. And I was really interested in Waldorf education and had no idea there was anything happening in Phoenix or the surrounding area. So I went to the lecture. The same night that I went to the first grade, like orientation night, I raced from there to the talk with Bruce Laurelin, and it was just blew me away. I was like, this is the education for my children. And so that's where I met Gina. I met Nancy DeBasic and Beth Farley, who was also involved back then with her 4 children, or there weren't 4 yet, but she eventually had 4. And so from there, I joined in I enrolled Tess in the Desert Wildflower School, which was a nursery in Nancy Hawk's home in Mesa, where Gina was the teacher. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of hard to get the timeline, but from there we formed a play group, and moms met in the park with their children. There was a study group in Peter's that took place in Peter's office, a anthroposophical study group that I got involved with, and then Desert Marigold Nursery opened in downtown Phoenix on Whitten, where Gina and Nancy taught, and from that I think Desert Marigold School came about in South Phoenix. There's so many details, but I enrolled Clay in kindergarten there and Theo in first grade, and I was the kindergarten assistant with Nancy DeBasic that year.
All right. Tell me the name of the house. What was that called? Desert Marigold Play Group or play?
We had 2 programs. Nancy had the beginning ones. Nancy DeBasic had her in-home program was the Desert Marigold, and I taught in the Hawks home, and that was the Desert Wildflower.
Okay.
And then we were at Whitten. We rented a space in downtown, a little bungalow, and a group of us, Alice and Carl, you were a part of that group, and we transformed and rented a little space, and we were there for 2 years. And in that 2 years, we were having the anthroposophical meetings, the forming of VOSWE, the Valley of the Sun Waldorf Education Association. We divided the city into quadrants. And so we each started looking for a property for our permanent home for the school. And during that time period, we discovered and found the property at 28th Street and went through, that's a whole nother name of how that came into being with Mark Finzer, Rudolph Steiner Foundation, the funding for it, the guarantors of the money. And we bought the property for $185,000. And we were so poor. I mean, we weren't able to pay salaries to the teachers or to people. Anyhow, but let's do introductions before we go into details of that. But there's a beautiful history of how the school came into being. But let's hear other people speak still.
All right, Alice, why don't you go? You're up.
Well, that was a great memory jog, Gina. The first time that we heard about Desert Marigold was when Jake was about 3, so that would have been 95, from Leslie and Paul Lambert.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure how they heard about it. I don't remember. But anyhow, I didn't even study anything about it that I recall. It was just almost an immediate, oh my God, this is amazing. This is perfect for Jacob, who was going to he was attending, what's the other sort of opposite of
Montessori?
Montessori school at the time, which I always will be grateful to them because they potty trained him. But anyhow.
Toilet independence.
But anyhow, he wasn't necessarily thriving there. And so this sounded perfect. And so with a lot, then there was the group of us, the Gallowas, I believe, maybe at that point, Diane and Paul Gallowa.
Oh, the Gallowas, yes.
Yeah, and
Sylvan
Amy,
and
course, Amy and Brian and myself and Carl, and found the place on Witten, and Jacob began going there, and we, just as Gina said, started to look for a different property ultimately, and it was amazing that we found the property we found, but the condition of that property, one of my first memories of the whole thing, besides just a lovely community of families, small families that began all of this and were passionate about it, was just the condition of the property and how much stuff there was on it, just tons of stuff.
Mhm.
And in a strange way, I think it sort of helped bond us, in addition to just having the initial preschool, just cleaning that place up and making plans for it and figuring out how we were going to work there. And I just remember it as a really special time, and in an odd sort of way, and I think anytime you do something hard and succeed, it just and you do it with a group of people, it just brings you closer. And I just feel like that was a really special community, in the beginning there, because we were starting a project that we all really believed in.
I remember meeting upstairs in the house one evening and the donkeys braying.
I can remember mice running across the floor when we met.
Right. Yeah.
And I also remember toads all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
And, potentially stepping on them and that kind of thing. So.
And in the early days of the school, there was a tremendous amount of work, and we all were committed to transforming it. And it was really a transformation for ourselves as well as the gift for the community that we were doing. But it was a process of becoming, and with all the hard work, but it formed the foundation for the school. It formed some of those relationships. I'm still, Amy and I are still best of friends, and she was there at the birth of my daughter, but we birthed something together, and it was hard work, but we also held the vision of what was in front of us, but the potential for what could be. And we, at even the onset, we knew the property. I mean, we bought 5 acres of land that had the potential of more because the nursery in the back of the property, we were like, we're going to buy that too. Eventually, we held this vision that it would be something not just for our children, but for the children who were unborn yet and the future. I mean, I think Nancy DeBasic was, continually, was like, it's not for our children that we're doing this. We're doing this for the greater community of Phoenix. But we were committed and we were hardworking together, laughing and crying and figuring out how are we going to solve this. But we did work through all the logistics of the financing, the building of it, the hauling a whole bunch of stuff away, lots of clearing and making space for something beautiful to come. Very much like the garden, very much like the garden.
That's beautiful. I have goosebumps.
Yeah.
I know. That's really
All right, Peter, how about you? How did you start this journey?
Well, I go back to Moses.
You were one of the isolated anthroposophists, Peter.
Right. We're still a little isolated. Well, I lived in Wisconsin back prior to 1986 when I moved to Phoenix. And in Wisconsin, I was part of the beginning of Pleasant Ridge Waldorf School, which was the first Waldorf school in the country to have a high school. That was long after I left. But we started that little school with just 3 children, one of whom was my daughter, who's now 45. So I had a picture of Waldorf education when I came to Arizona, and really didn't find anything here anthroposophical or Waldorf. Never heard of it. There have been a couple of women teachers, one of whom worked at the university, name I'm forgetting.
Barbara Jaquette.
There you go. Thank you.
And then Jane Saracola but she was not a teacher. She was a parent. Sorry, I'm interjecting.
No, thank you, because you have a prodigious memory. I am terrible with names. It seems when I look back, I see faces, but anyway, yeah, so interrupt whenever. But yeah, so I had heard of them. I eventually we did meet them. They had a brief effort to start a Waldorf school. It didn't get off its feet for different reasons, but I eventually learned that there was something going on in Tucson, a study group, an anthroposophical study group that had been going on for a while. So through that process, I met Chris Allen, who together we would go every second Friday to Tucson to that study group. We did that for over a year. And in that process, we began to meet different people. And finally, and I'm not sure here how it began, but we started a study group in my office in Tempe to kind of formulate how we could begin a school. And I remember, along with our study, we were continually discussing whether we should find a teacher or whether we should find a building first. If we have a building, well, then the teacher will come. Well, if we have a teacher, well, then we'll, we went back and forth about that. And finally, I think Nancy DeBasic, who I so regret can't be with us, and we all know the story there, threw up her arms and said, well, we're just going to go and find a building because I'm willing to do the teaching and Gina as well. And so that's when we, I think Nancy announced one day that she had found with others the property on Whitten in central Phoenix and a beautiful little building to start in a nice big yard, which we cleaned up. The children loved that yard. And that was kind of the prototype of what we were looking for. And I think primarily through Amy came to the property on 28th Street. And it was in many ways a kind of semi-abandoned property with the old house full of all kinds of things. But as you already said, the community really began there and just taking ownership of that property and living into it and cleaning it up and beginning to look ahead. And of course, then eventually we through Tom's help, decided to start with a straw bale building for the kindergarten. And where am I now in time and space?
Well, we bought the property, Nancy and I mean, the whole question, it was actually on Good Friday. I was on my spring break from the Steiner College, hiking in the mountains in, oh gosh, in Bisbee, Arizona, in the Cochise Stronghold, and we got snowed in.
Oh, yeah.
And that weekend, that Good Friday weekend, I was completing my training and where in the world am I going to teach? But that was also the first meeting that Peter, Nancy, and one other person at your home was in the formative stages. And so I always felt there was this connection of that Good Friday weekend, that on Easter, the idea of starting a school after Jane Sirico or Barbara Jaquette's earlier attempts previously, as Peter's mentioned. But then we began the two initiatives, one, a family, the Hawk family, and then Nancy opened their homes and we had the little seeds began there.
Right.
But we realized that wasn't going to work. So then we found the location in Witten, the Witten House. And then from there, we were there for 2 years building the community. And then I think we started with 6 children. We had Tess and Lily didn't come yet. She was a little bit older. It wasn't until we
Right.
had Polly Cole when we bought the property. But
Yeah.
we bought the property. There was another meeting that we had where Tom, my husband, met Mark Finzer, and we had this photo album of what we were doing in this site. And that the money came, it was a beautiful summer afternoon, and we had how many of our families, we were all walking with a trail of children, and the orange blossoms were in bloom, and it was just the most perfect day in the desert. And here we saw the beauty and the potential of what this could be. And Mark Finzer was like hesitant from the Rudolf Steiner Foundation of helping us buy this property. And so it was just the smell in the air and the beauty of it was so rich. And we knew that it was meant to be, again, the destiny showing of the birth of this school. And it was absolutely wonderful. And the people who were involved, we were so committed, Nancy and Joseph DeBasic, the Stambaugh, your whole family, the Martins family, and Peter. And we knew that this was to be, and it was going to be a lot of work, but we could do it together.
And I
And
think several people put up pledges toward the purchase
Yeah.
of the property that allowed it to happen, so that there was a community buy-in from the very beginning. We were all invested. And so, yeah. But, I think without Nancy and Gina at the beginning, this would not have happened in many ways. I mean, maybe obviously it would have happened with other people, but because it was just such a longing for it to be.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was, I think, a godsend that those two people were there to get things going,
Yeah.
because the teacher is the center of the school.
Yeah.
And without someone committed, and there were just so many personal sacrifices, I think, that were made on the part of Nancy and Joseph and the part of Gina and Tom in the beginning, that just, uncountable things that were done, known and unknown, to make things happen and to bring things together. And I think they were the nucleus around which this infant developed and grew out into what it has become today, which is a grown-up, 21 years old, and an adult, and with a lot of the adult problems that present as well, in terms of finding our way in the world and being able to connect together in a new way as a community. This community, how do we become community, is still the issue, still the task. Yeah. It's wonderful to go back and look at all of this, because as I get older, my memory gets younger. But, so thank you all.
What were some of the challenges that you faced?
Well, there were the financial ones, of course, but that really didn't, I mean, that was a concern, but I don't know that there was, a really considerable worry about that. I think there was a confidence too in what we were doing, just moving ahead and taking advantage of the resources of the people who are part of the group, the willingness to participate and to show up on work days and to really deal with, transforming this kind of abandoned, neglected piece of property into a beautiful space for the children. And I think, the love that was carried for the children, present and to come, was always the underlying motivation in what we were doing. And I think it was because we saw, and I've heard this from so many people, that upon their first encounter with Waldorf education, it's like, that's it. That's the pot of gold. That's the real article, and immediately drawn to it. And that was my experience back in Baroka, Wisconsin, when I first heard about it. The teacher at the daycare center where my daughter went would go every year to a different early childhood training, high school, Piaget, Montessori, different looking. And she went one year and came back and said, I don't need to go to training anymore. I found it. It's called Waldorf. We've never heard of it, but if you will help me, I will we can start a Waldorf school together. And so that was my very first introduction to anthroposophy as well. I had never heard of anthroposophy before that time. And so it was through my daughter that I came to Waldorf and anthroposophy, which has been, the major preoccupation of my life for the last 35, 40 years. So I'm still feeling like I'm a novice in all of that in terms of understanding and working with anthroposophy and supporting the impulse of Waldorf education because I love it, because it's obviously, the genuine article.
I can't imagine how Jake would be if he hadn't attended the school. He's so right-brained. He's so, I don't know. He's artistic. He composes and all his own music. He got sort of an introduction to all of those sort of heartfelt, creative, imaginative sort of parts of life, that he would not have gotten in a public school. And I'm just so so very grateful that he was able to do that, and the intimacy of it as well. The small, community-based intimacy of it was perfect for him as well. So I just, it was fate.
Yeah. And the school began as a free, independent, private school, surviving on tuitions and donations and other sources of funding. But it was really, created out of the resources of the people who were right there involved with it more than anything. I mean, we were not getting government funding. We were having to,
fundraise.
with
The
that-
garage sale at your house, Alice, remember on Super Bowl Sunday? We were scraping by to be able to pay for our teacher salaries as well as chicken food and pig food for the backyard.
I remember, I just remember fun stuff, I remember chasing the pig around, the baby pigs, trying to catch them.
She would escape. The weekend that we bought the property and Nancy's daughter, Joanna, found a pig roaming the streets in Phoenix. And so that was our pig for the property anyhow. And she would escape. And it was during morning circle. It was like, Miss Gina, the pig's gotten out again. And we'd have to go bring her back in. And so, but
we had baby pigs at one point.
And then we had the baby pig because she was pregnant. That's why she was escaping anyhow. And so when we had the 7 little piglets and they would squeal like a pig, I'm kid you not, I'm with children and the piglets are out, and then we actually ended up having to farm them out. But we're getting aside from ourselves.
Just-
And looking at when Peter was saying, the financial was really hard. We didn't have enough money to get by. I mean, we were making it out of love and sacrifice by many people.
Yeah.
But another aspect of it is that Nancy and I both were very new to Waldorf. Not new. I mean, I had just completed my Waldorf training and Nancy was taking up the training. But many people, as Peter stated, walk in there and you fall in love. And you don't know what exactly it is, but there's this thing that resonates in your heart about what this is. And so one of the aspects of the work that we were doing in those early years was parent and community education about what is Waldorf education. And we were in a Phoenix, which is a huge metropolis, and there was not any Waldorf education there for years. And so how do we start educating it? We started trying to bring in people like Bruce Laurel, and we brought in Renee Carita, we brought in Margaret Meyercourt, we brought in speakers who could speak to not just the application of what you do in the classroom, but the deeper meaning behind what Waldorf education is, some of the anthroposophy, but also just why is this so different? I mean, I'm a trained Waldorf teacher, but I also have a degree in Montessori and a degree in early childhood education in the public school realm. But there's this, why is this so different? How does it speak to us? And so one of the aspects of what we struggled with in the early years is an understanding of what Waldorf education is and sharing that with the community, but also finding that for ourselves. I mean, Kim, you took up the training of being a Waldorf teacher, and Alice, you and Carl carried so much of the financial, the social dynamic of the school. And so
I did a lot of the administrative stuff,
work.
But in terms of getting people to understand Waldorf, one of the challenges that I personally found family-wise, for Jacob was I really bought into the, no TV, no video game type of thing. And that was harder for some families to do. And I always was trying to walk a line or figure out how to, what should I do, I guess, in that regard? What kind of balance, because there's pressure. There's societal pressure back then. Even maybe there's probably more today. Social media was really becoming a thing back then. I found that difficult to hold my ground, I guess, in some ways. And I don't know whether what's going on with that today in today's Waldorf schools, it must be even more difficult, or whether the stance has changed a little bit, but that was difficult. And the other thing that's just a little more pragmatic was transportation, because people came from so many different parts of the city. So there was lots of, how are we going to get home? Lots of carpooling and trying to arrange that kind of thing, and figuring out, just the logistics of running a school.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Kim.
And in the location of where we decided where the school would be, in the early years when we were at Witten, there was a family who offered us $40,000 to bring the school to them, but it had to be in North Scottsdale in their backyard or in that neighborhood. And we were like, where's the place that is going to meet the need of most people? And it's not going to be easy for anyone to get to. I mean, I think I lived closest to the school and I was 7 miles away, but in downtown as opposed to South Phoenix. And so where's a place where we can meet the most people, or meet the need of the most people, but not make it so that we couldn't afford it for, anyone who wanted this education. And we offered it. In the early years, it was, we were living very lean.
Hand to mouth.
Yeah, well, very lean. And so so that when that offer of this money came, it was like, oh, we could, and it's like, no, is this going to meet children where they're at? Families where they're at? And we all would have to drive a distance to get here. We all have to put in to make it work. And to
Plus, I
make,
just didn't think we wanted to be beholden to, it's almost
exactly.
like
Yeah.
we don't want to be
Yeah.
corrupted.
And as Alice said, and I'm sorry, I talk a lot, but I think we all were in early stages of what does it really mean to be a Waldorf school? The screens, the nutrition, the biodynamics, I remember, Kim, you telling me stories about the question with your girls with Barbie dolls.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you had made a cardboard box and not buying into the materialism. But I think we all were on this path of understanding what it means to be a Waldorf school, to be a Waldorf community, and not as a teacher wearing the right color of the day or the following all the hoops that they talk about the teachers. But really, what does it mean? And so we were all learning together in this, and none of us had it figured out. And we were working it together and bouncing off these questions. When I still remember that how you had your Barbie dolls in the little cardboard box, and giving your dog a bath together in the bathtub. I mean, do you remember those silly stories we did?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And how do we do this together? And we were learning. I mean, just like a new parent, you're learning as you go, and you work with each other to understand it, and not just what Steiner says or what Montessori says, but really, how do we find the path in the times in which we're living, in the media question, the nutrition question, the sleep question. Harry Potter was really big, and parents were bringing, that question. It's like, no, a 5-year-old doesn't need to know about these things right now.
You know what? Jacob will never forgive me for that. He still brings up every once in a while, and you wouldn't let me read Harry Potter.
I remember, I do remember those questions. And now we have it with, as a teacher now, I mean, I'm teaching preschool, and these children are exposed to so much.
Oh, yeah.
How do we nurture the innocence of childhood, but also know that, in this pandemic, I was doing Zooms with my preschool families, not the children so much, but, we were singing songs, we were outside and we were playing. I mean, and how do you make it live where you're at in the times you're at? And in the 90s, and when we broke ground on the Straw Bale building, and when 9/11 happened, and those children were in the shelter of the arms when we built that straw bale. And I remember very clearly the parents were like, we will keep your children safe here. And I mean, that's to meet them where they're at, instead of just doing as Steiner says. And Alice, you always ask really good questions about why are we doing this?
I
just
don't remember that, but
well, you did. You were questioning why we do this and not just doing it rotely. And I think Nancy and I, we're like, well, why do? And one of the Steiner things is that the teachers always wear long sleeves and don't show any skin. And I'm like, it's 105 degrees out in Phoenix. And talking to my mentor and saying, I have to be true. If I'm going to be wearing woolies and silks, why do we do this? Is it to protect the etheric of the teacher? But you don't have to how do you live with that in 105 degrees, 110 degrees? So
how do we adapt Waldorf to our real life situation? Kim, what were some of the challenges for you in the beginning?
Oh my goodness. So for me, as I look back, I think my memory is less clear. And I'm thinking because I had 4 little children.
Right.
And so I remember all the things that you were all talking about. The financial issues. And I think for our family, the biggest obstacle was the financial and just affording the tuition. That was pretty big, but it was, like Gina said, very affordable. So we were able to have Clay and Theo in kindergarten and first grade. I think we had to take Theo out of the nursery school because we couldn't quite afford it then. We were on one salary. So it was Michael's teaching salary, and I was home with the kids. So that for us was part of it. Yeah.
So how did you, from that decide to become more involved as a teacher? What was,
So, yeah, I never had the intention of teaching. That was not in my, not, I wasn't thinking about that at all. And so it really was Nancy Dubasic who really influenced me, and she really pushed me to do the training. And she said, even if you don't become a teacher, the training will be life-changing. And so when I assisted with her, I think I realized that this was where I wanted to be a teacher. When I got into the classroom and started working with her and the children, that was a pivotal moment for me. And I met Barbara, is it Barbara Patterson, who
Barbara
wrote
Patterson. Mhm.
Over the Rainbow Bridge?
Yes.
Oh,
just
that's
said-
a wonderful book. Yeah.
Yeah. She just said to me, you've got to become a kindergarten teacher. So I joined the training at Rudolph Steiner College, and Janet Kalman was the teacher trainer at that time. And I was there for a year, and then our family moved to New Mexico. So I had to take this hiatus and came back and finished my training with Rena Osmer in cycle 8. Yeah. And also it did there was a foundation studies group that met for 2 years in Phoenix, and people came from all over the state to attend that. And it was kind of this, a lot of people just from teachers from all over were teaching the course. Yeah, so that was a really life-changing experience for me too, was to do that study of anthroposophy. That was really life-changing. And now I'm studying how to know higher worlds again with a group here on Maui, and to revisit that 21 years later in the place I am in my life now. It's amazing to just go and delve into that again.
yeah. That's what we were reading in the beginning, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Nice light.
And the verses that we had, we always, started all of our board meetings and all of our faculty meetings, and then the forming of the college, and the healing social life is found that we worked with. So,
How were decisions made in the beginning?
do you remember me arm wrestling with Carl?
I don't remember that.
I had an arm wrestling, Carl. We really strived to work out a consensus, but we would have meetings that would last forever. Arduous meeting, arduous soul. But I remember one time I said, Carl, I'm just going to arm wrestle you for this one.
I'm going to have to ask him if he remembers that. That's funny.
It was some decision on spending or something, because anyhow, but we tried to really work out of consensus. And
I think we had different roles. Was Carl a treasurer at one point?
he was the treasurer.
Yeah, and I think I did a newsletter and, took minutes or something. I can't remember, but yeah.
I do remember those long meetings.
Oh God, I remember
Oh,
those. Yep.
And through that, when you work hard together and you banter, because we didn't all agree. Nancy always carried, one vision of the school, or one, her and Joseph carried a very idealistic, and mine was very more will and practical, and then the feeling realm of our parents who wanted this for their children. And so it really gave us this opportunity to grow together and to hear other sides of perspectives of the school and how we collectively make decisions. Just like when you're parenting a child, the parents may have different perspectives, but it was always the greatest good for the community and for the school was inevitable. But there were long meetings and sometimes very teary, sometimes very emotional, but we got through it together, and we always knew we had friendships that underlying depth of caring for each other. And so, but I don't know if that's how we always made our decisions, but that we were striving for.
Yeah. And we had a board of directors pretty early on, and that was the governance of the school. And the preoccupation, I think, in a lot of meetings was fundraising and working out how all the practical matters, like you were saying, transportation and you know, how to handle pollution and all those.
And the various buildings, building remodeling and,
Right.
I remember Carl built a ramp or something, I think.
A ramp, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And getting
was
the
kind of a big deal.
staircase up into the upper level so that we would meet the code of, I mean, and we were working with practical implications of following the building code, but then also following what's right for the wall for the young child.
Yeah.
And also
Building
so
up
when we
around the pond.
pond
Right,
being
that whole
fenced
pond
in.
thing. And there was a driveway issue at one point that
Yes.
happened later on. I can't remember when that
We
was.
had to make it accessible for the fire accessibility. So we had
Oh,
to use
yeah.
the decomposed, stabilized, decomposed granite and the entrance and where the parking could be, and knowing
And we had
no one-
irrigation ditch stuff. And
Right.
you guys dealt with.
Who was going to feed
Right.
the animals on the weekends? Yeah.
Oh,
pigs
yeah.
and the chickens and the care for it. So there was a practical hands-on, but then we were working with getting enrollment, because if we got more children, we would have more funding, we could pay the tuition, and so if people could pay, but then we also wanted it offered to anybody who wanted this education. We didn't want funds to limit that, but then we also had very practical, we need to be able to pay salaries. We need to be able to keep our lights on in the building. We need to be able to have the nicest quality watercolor paper, or, we couldn't buy the organic felt for the puppets. Nancy and I would be going to secondhand stores and finding old wool sweaters that we could make puppets into, or dyeing old t-shirts. But, how do you balance the practical and the business aspects of a school with the soul aspects of the school and the festivals that we pulled together, the enrollments? How many of those, street fairs did we go to and trying to, show our beautiful children's art, and then our conscientiousness of the gardens and making sure they were biodynamic and putting during preps and blessing the physical environment. I mean, it was.
Who were among some of the, besides yourself and Kim and Gina and Nancy, who were some of the first teachers that came in after you guys?
Polly Cole was our first grade teacher. In fact, she gave me this star necklace because I seek my star finds me.
Right.
She was, I know, our first. We had Hans from Germany,
Right.
his family, and we had Megan, Isabel
Revis.
Revis.
Yeah.
We would try to get people from our community to take up the training also. So.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
There was one person, I'm trying to remember her name, who was there early on.
Well, when did Pax start teaching?
Yeah,
Oh,
Hex came in a little later.
She was a little later, but I don't remember how much later.
Yeah.
When we brought in the modular, because we had the straw bale was designed for the kindergartens, but there were 4 kindergarten classrooms, and we used 2 of those for grades, and then we still had the house. I'd have to look back at my notes of who's because for the years we were there were people who came and were part. The woman who spoke 3 different languages, Rebecca, was it?
oh, yeah.
She spoke Spanish, French, and
Right.
English, and she had the little girl. Anyhow, there were many people that.
And Laura, what about Laura?
She had the 2 boys.
The 2, and then later more.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, Laura Cody?
Huh?
Laura
Laura
Alvarado Cody?
Alvarado, yeah.
Yeah.
What can you guys share? Some favorite memory or 2?
Well,
Too many.
I still fondly remember this didn't happen at the school, but well, I can't remember what they were called. Walking with my lantern into the night,
Yeah, our lantern
there
walk.
was just something about that Halloween-y sort of, or solstice kind of ceremony or whatever that I still, I don't know, I really like that. And of course, all of the celebration, the May Day, we just talking with some about this, the May Day pole, you know, in the front yard, that people danced around and all of that kind of stuff.
That's exactly what I was thinking of, like remembering May Day in the yard on Witten with all the families. It was just so wonderful. And then the lantern walk at the Tempe Park. I can't remember what it's called.
Papago Park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Papago Park,
Yes.
we were in the desert, we were walking, and we had, that's where we let people know about our school, and we were walking, and then we were lighting the lanterns, and the children, we had paper bags with candles in them at the parks, and my husband was lighting all of them, and the boys were behind there blowing them out as he went. Oh.
Right.
Or when we were building the building together and we would have parties, you know, we'd been working like dogs all day, and then we'd put music on and we'd play kick the bucket, or not kick the bucket. We'd play in the backyard in the dark with the children. And it was just, they were, you know, watching the stars, sitting on the top of the roof of the building, and looking and watching the shooting stars on the meteor showers, you know, as well as the beautiful festivals, the sweating and playing, working hard and playing hard together.
Yeah.
Watching Forrest climb the trees all the way to the top.
Oh yeah. Oh my
You should
gosh.
see what he climbs now. Oh my gosh, I'm following him on Instagram, and he is climbing. He was one of the children was, he was our test for the fence around the pond. My husband designed the rebar fence that was there. And can Forrest climb it? Not can the pigs get out or the chickens get out. Can Forrest climb it? So
Yeah.
So he's gone on to be a climber. Like, that's what
he does that a lot. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
You mean, what do you mean? He climbs what?
He climbs with belays and, you know.
Oh, okay. He
rock climbing, the Grand
Oh, okay.
Canyon,
Right.
the
Wow.
El Capitan.
That's
and, you know,
interesting. Huh.
yeah, I follow him. I'm like, I remember when you were, but he's doing that for enjoyment. I don't know if he's professional. And you, Peter, what about your memories of favorite things?
Yeah, all of those. That's what I was thinking of, the lantern walk especially, because that was so magical.
Yeah.
And I remember one gathering, and I'm not sure what it was, at night. I had to give a talk. I was so nervous. I was feeling so unable to sum up all the feelings and just kind of try to generate some just, you know, the gratitude I was feeling. I don't even remember what I said. I was trying to be inspiring, but it was a moment of culmination for me personally, because it was the coming together of a whole community. Maybe it was to celebrate the building, the Strawbell building completion, or I'm not sure what that event was, but yeah, I remember that very much. I also, I'll get into that. It's no time.
When we blessed the school, when we bought the property, and it was on the same day, when I say like September 7th, when we blessed and initiated the school, and we had, and there it was also on the same founding date of the first Waldorf school that Steiner had done. So it was pretty momentous.
Yeah.
Lots of celebrations of life. You know, the lantern walks when we would be out in the desert, but then when we brought it onto our property and we had the children walking around the pond, when we had our earthen dragon oven outside the classroom, which tracked all the mud in, but it was all good. But we lit the fire, and the dragon's breathing fire. And
I even remember fondly some of the auctions that we had. You know, at night when, you know, we had lanterny things and, you know, just entertainment and stuff going on at the same time we were trying to raise money. I don't know.
Right.
Those are a lot of work.
Yeah.
We worked and played hard together. And
I remember that earthen oven too, and I remember making potatoes in it. Making potatoes for Thanksgiving, I think. It was so fun.
We weren't able to ever bake bread in it though. It didn't bake bread well, but the potatoes and the fire were good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I know I said about an hour and I want to honor everybody's time. Is there anything else that anybody would like to add or final thoughts?
I wonder what's the next step in this process you're doing.
No, I just have this. I think Barb she's interviewing some people.
Okay,
So Colleen, I was in Colleen's group earlier this week. There's this group, and then there's Colleen's or Barb's doing a group, I think, next weekend.
okay.
So you,
And
you,
I'll
you
send that.
divided people up, basically. You divided people up to
Yeah.
just talk to, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So who did you interview? I'm sorry, who did you interview last time? Just so we know.
Oh, I was so it was Colleen, and she was interviewing me, Amy, Jamie. Bad. I'm just going around the circle. Amy, Jamie, me. Maybe that was it. I think
Yeah.
there's
Have you
one
gotten
more.
in touch with Glenda Groyer?
Oh, yeah,
No,
Glenda.
I know, and I'm doing the slideshow, and
That's who I was.
yeah, Glenda, like
Glenda was really involved, yeah.
I
Yeah.
know. So
Good,
maybe
yeah.
that's maybe we'll do another one.
What about any of the other, like, Jacob's
lamb?
teacher was Mrs. Hans, but I can't think of her first name. She probably went back to Germany. I mean, I presume you can't get hold of her, maybe.
Yeah.
Too bad, because I really liked her.
Yeah, it's been fun. I'm really enjoying doing this. I did the one slideshow that I think is gonna get whatever post. It's my first time, so they're gonna get better. But I have so many pictures. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna stop at 90, but I could go on, and it's like a flashback. It's like there's this cute little Glenda. She's in the pond. Like there's like 3 canoes in there. All these kids in the canoe pond. I'm like,
Well, things it's like, did we really do that?
I know. I'm like from a liability standpoint. I'm like, oh wow. And the pictures of the buildings, that the farmhouse that didn't have electricity, and the kids were in there all the time. I think there were like holes in the floor. I mean,
Oh, that was.
It was so cool that we could do what we wanted initially, because, again, I remember when Jake being young, the first part of, first 5 years or whatever, they could climb the trees, and, they went all over the place, and did all the kinds of things that in a public school, they're afraid you're gonna, they're afraid of being sued for. And thank God,
Yeah.
that we could do that, because
Yeah.
that was part of it. That was part of the fun for the kids and for us as well,
Yeah.
And we were in it together, and the families were there with their children, and it was an oasis for all of us. And I think that the whole desert image, I mean, the beautiful mountains, South Mountains surrounding and protecting the
Yeah.
school site, but
The
also
farm-
the beauty
Farm
of our children.
environment that made it so
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
It wasn't really an urban, it didn't really even
No.
fit. It was like going to this different country where
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
children were allowed to roam and to be,
Right.
to explore. And so it had from the beginning that pond and
The whole ruralness of it.
and the animals and all those experiences that would have been impossible in a concrete
Yeah.
public school, with a parking lot.
Yeah.
And the basketball court, and it was just completely other.
Yep.
And the treasures we found on that property,
Right.
the lamp post, the dragon with the fire breathing,
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
and Amy's father
That's so
had
good.
found the
Oh.
electrical to get that one eye would be one
Oh,
color and
that's
one eye would be the
right.
other color,
Oh.
and that we
Oh,
had excavated that it was abandoned on that property, and so much that was there, a natural beauty that was there that we uncovered, and it's continually being cultivated. And when we were doing the first, biodynamic composting and planting the seeds for the future, I mean, there was so much there, a richness, and it came out of the love of many people,
Yeah.
love and energy and strength to get us through. And that's what we need as building community.
And don't forget the goats.
Oh, don't forget those goats. Absolutely
Right.
not. Those old goats that were there.
Right.
And the showgirl chickens.
And the show.
Showgirls.
They would lay eggs in the right outside the glass door of the straw bale. And we wanted the chickens there because they would eat the scorpions that
Yeah.
were around there.
Scorpions, yeah.
And the snake, that one time we found that huge snake and I had to take it with a pitchfork and walk it to the back of the property, and all the children are watching. What's Miss Gina going to do with that snake?
Whoa.
We deal with those snakes that we get.
Huh. Yeah,
Thanks for getting us together, Jill. It was
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
you all,
fun.
and
So
all
fun.
home week here.
Well, it's so great to see everybody, and thank you for your time. And I'll send you a link to this.
All
Okay,
right.
Oh, great.
thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you. Take care.
I'm
Good
Becky.
luck, everybody.
Good. Love
Bye.
you guys.
Blessings.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.